The Mini Cooper S convertible. This is a dying breed of car, something that is in a class of its own, and you're gonna love this or you're not. Small cars in North America are essentially being evaporated slowly but surely, and cars that used to be small, like Honda Civics or Corollas, are now much bigger to be able to compete with the likes of SUVs. So this is pretty much a lifestyle vehicle. It's a two-door, it's a small car, it doesn't have much of a back seat or much cargo capacity. It's something you're going to drive around as a single person, or potentially just a person that wants to be left alone, somebody that wants the top-down experience, a front-wheel drive car, and quirky as hell styling. In this zesty yellow or lime green color is definitely screaming, look, I've had enough of everybody else and conforming. Although it does feel very conformist in many ways. It is essentially all BMW. Transmission, engine, some of the interior technology like a scaled down version of iDrive, and the interior space is a blend of what you find on an extremely cheap car. I'm talking like lower level Kia or Hyundai products with some premium flares. And when you look at the price tag of something like this, and it is optioned out to $45,000, and you can get it around like $42,000, it's a lot of money for what this is. And it's not going to blow you away in terms of feature set. While everything works mostly well, the seats are comfortable, it has seat heaters, it has the electronic gauge cluster and center screen, it just doesn't feel super high tech or super high end, which is also its charm because really nothing else looks like this. But that doesn't mean it's good either. If you're opting for the manual transmission like this, the linkage is very strange. When you shift, there's no reverse lockout, so oftentimes if you're used to other manual transmissions where you go all the way to the left and forward, you're going in reverse in this car. There's no lockout with a ring or pushing down, and it feels very plasticky. The clutch take-up is like my first manual transmission. While it's very easy to drive, the clutch is super spongy. But again, probably people are not buying this in a manual, and at least it's offered in that. The automatic is good. We've tested it before, and most of all the features, including the scaled down iDrive, works great. Most everything in here is good. It's just a small car. There's not a lot of storage cubbies. You're not going to store a lot of things in here, and if you're a hoarder, that might be a good thing for you, where you can only fit a certain amount of things. Surprisingly, even with the soft top convertible, it is pretty quiet overall. That's one thing that definitely surprised me, even in the wind. The Bluetooth calls or conversations, the audio system is pretty well sorted out, so it is a very weird space to be in, but it is definitely fun and enjoyable. But if you're looking at this as your only car, and if you're going to put people in it, it's going to be kind of DOA, and that's why this formula is going away, at least in North America. Let's head in the shop and briefly talk about some of the technical attributes of it. This is the second Mini Cooper we've been under, or I've been under. This is the Mini Cooper S convertible. And Jack is getting his eyes filled with one of the smallest cars in the United States. Jack, tell me about it.
Well, much like your EV, Mark, we did the Mini Cooper, or you did the Mini Cooper EV earlier, last year, I think. This is also based on UKL. It's also a very old car at this point. The hardtop variant of this generation Mini came out in 2013. The convertible, which this is, came out in 2015. It's based on UKL1, which is a derivative of the platform that the 1 Series and 2 Series are on, the front-wheel drive BMW vehicles, which I believe is called UKL2, which also means the engines in this are all BMW motors. In the regular Mini Cooper here in the US, you get a 3-cylinder, or in this Mini Cooper S, you get this 2-liter, which is called the B48. It's a single-turbo, direct-injected 4-cylinder.
It's made in the Netherlands, the transmission is made in Germany, and the engine is made in the UK. So it's still, they try to maintain some of that European feel to it. It's not just farmed out to China or Mexico for cost cutting.
So before we take this on the road, I'm going to talk about the suspension architecture quickly. It's a strut front car. It has aluminum front knuckles, and it is a multi-link rear, and I've never seen smaller rear control arms than that, Mark.
Yeah, and this is the beauty of having a small car. You don't need to over-engineer every part. Less is more, and that's what's great about this, and nobody cares because nobody's buying them, Jack.
No, that's the sad part about all this. This is really a stopgap car. This is an LCI vehicle. That's the reason why they're back in the press fleet. LCI means mid-cycle refresh. In this case, they've done a new front and rear bumper treatment, or some at least exterior changes, and they've changed some things about the interior, but mechanically this car is largely the same, and I think they're waiting for their next generation Mini, which is supposed to be largely EV, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's going EV. So let's get this on the road, and we're going to talk deeply about what's great and what's not so great.
All right.
Man, this soy chai is off the charts, Jack.
I'm sure it is, Mark. So I'm glad you won this in your divorce.
Well, let me tell you the background. So my ex-wife's sister had this car, who's also now my ex-wife, and I won that in the divorce. And it still smells like her Bath and Body Works bubblegum body lotion too, so we got that going for us. Now the thing is, now that I've become a full-blown man in a zesty yellow Mini Cooper S convertible, I love this car. I've always loved it, but I've never loved it enough to buy it, and apparently there's a lot of people that share that same sentiment, because as we're going to find out, it is amazing to drive. And there are some serious downfalls to this car, but one is definitely not its drivability.
I will say, Mark, this is not the least conspicuous I've ever felt, driving around some farm roads in a neon green two-door convertible with a British flag on the top.
Well, at least the engine is from the UK or Great Britain or whatever you want to call
really,
it.
as we talked about in the shop, this is basically a BMW underneath.
All right, Jack, let's see how she gets
Is it
offline.
in first, not reverse?
Yeah, that's another thing. I was... Story for a different time.
All right.
Open diff, Jack, but it doesn't need an LSD because it's got a short wheelbase and a really soft suspension. You know, people say this has got a hard suspension. I don't think so. I think once you get it really loaded up, you notice that there's a ton of compliance and wheel travel in here for the bad pavement. However, it does have a more aggressive rebound, so you get that like
over
quick reaction.
expansion joints and bumps in the road, like sharp bumps, does not handle it particularly well. But it's a small wheelbase
But the
car.
big bumps,
Yeah.
it does handle well. And you know, one of my favorite things is it really does turn in good. And all you have to do is lift a little bit. Once it starts to wash out, I mean, when I say lift, it's like a hair.
You said this reminded you of like the old Integras.
Well, yeah, it reminds me of the Integra we drove with the way how quick the front end is. And like you said, short wheelbase really helps that out a lot. This is an amazingly fun car to drive around on the street. And, you know, you can go up the trim levels and get the JCW if you want to go even more hardcore, but I don't know. This is a very specific car for a very specific person. And when I went shopping with my ex-wife for this, she had
Your second ex-wife.
my second ex-wife. She had a very, she's one of those one percenters that wanted a coupe, wanted a small car, and wanted it to be front wheel drive. And when I say
small car,
exactly, that's the problem. She was talking Chevy Spark, and this was almost too big for her.
so she's not a one percenter in taste, but she's a one percenter in wanting something in America
That does not
is a
exist.
shoebox.
Yes, that does not exist anymore. So Mini is in a segment of its own, and they have been for quite a while, which also just goes to show you why this is a dying breed. Nobody's buying these. Everybody wants big cars. And while I understand that, it doesn't make this any less exciting or fun and engaging to drive, because this is like, to me, 20 years ago, I've been like, okay, when Mini first came out or rebooted, like, this is exciting. And now it's just died. And when I look at this car, I'm happy it exists, but I know it's not going to be around.
Well, this
much
is just an
longer.
LCI, right? That's why these cars are back in the press fleet. We talked about it in the shop. This is a holding pattern for Mini. But before I tell you my philosophical beliefs of this car, walk me through the engine.
The engine, 2-liter, turbocharged. Like every other turbocharged four-popper, it kind of gives up at the top end. It gives you a ton of torque where you'll waste the tires. It gives you that huge wow factor. It feels like a much bigger displacement engine. And then, it just kind of chokes out at the end. And that's just, That's just the way these cars are today.
And it feels faster than the numbers suggest.
Yes, it does. The tuning is excellent, however. While it just kind of gives up at the end, it's always smooth. It never seems to lose power. It doesn't hesitate. It's not pulling timing. Good. The manual transmission in this car, I'm glad it's here, but it feels very plasticky. You know, first gear and second gear, if you're used to going all the way to the left, reverse is gated to all the way to the left, and there's no lockout, so you don't have to push it down. So oftentimes I'll go into first and I'm actually in reverse. If I want to do a second hard shift, downshift, I'm going into like the lockout position. So it's not the best manual. However, the clutch take up and all that stuff is good. Really, all the input stuff is pretty decent in this car.
I think with that out of the way, I do want to talk about my problem with this car. Say you are not someone who wants the smallest car in the world, but you want a small, fun hatchback. Forget the fact that we're in a convertible. You're looking at other cars because this thing is so much money. Even the regular Mini Cooper S, non-convertible, is in the high $30,000 range. That prices it as being something more expensive than a Veloster and a base model GTI, the new Civic Si, all of these other fun cars that do the sporty part of this much better.
Yeah, and that's its biggest problem, man, because that's the reality of this. Mini is still trying to capture that premium price tag while the larger competitors have gotten better.
The Civic has a nicer
usable.
interior than this.
Everything, those cars are better than this, other than the fact that this feels light on its feet, nimble, and has a ton of character, shitload of character. But you're not going to want to pay $10,000 more for that in this day and age, and I think that's why this has become a lot more irrelevant, except for those small people, and those small people that are not, when I say it, that small amount of people
Who are oh so small because they want a small car. Yes.
They will love this car to death, much like I really do love this car. I can throw away a lot of the problems with it that I have because it is so unique, and the driving character is so unique. It's just, I couldn't spend that type of money for what it is.
And the convertible we have is what, $42,000?
Yeah, it's a lot of coin for this.
But two-door convertible front-wheel drive, you almost have no options in this country. So,
with that said, Jack, let's head into the garage and talk about the final thoughts.
all right.
Final thoughts on the Mini Cooper S convertible. I enjoyed driving this car more than I care to admit. Some of it is the fact that it actually has some character that many cars now no longer do. And the ability to move the top back, which is a great mechanism, if you're in a good climate, it makes it feel even more special. Now, yes, it's not the most practical, it's not the most usable, nor is it trying to be. It's a two-door car that is essentially a two-seater with a little bit of cargo capacity, and maybe you put your dog or your 30 cats in the back seat. I'm not quite sure. But one thing we do know, at least in the United States, is these cars are pretty much dead. If you want one of these, this is the time to spec one out, find the one that you want, and really enjoy it. I'm going to leave it at that, but thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.